The studio lights of The Tonight Show glowed softly as the band finished playing. The audience cheered loudly as the host walked to his desk. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Jimmy Fallon with a huge smile, "my next guest is a legend. Actor, director, and the man who defined the American Western. Please welcome Clint Eastwood." The audience exploded with applause. Clint Eastwood slowly walked onto the stage. At 90-plus years old, he moved carefully but with the same quiet strength people had seen in his films for decades. Jimmy shook his hand with excitement. "Clint, this is unbelievable," Jimmy said. "You've been in so many iconic movies. I grew up watching you." Clint smiled softly and sat down. "Thanks, Jimmy. That makes me feel very old," he joked. The audience laughed. For a few minutes, the conversation stayed light. They talked about movies, directing, and Clint's famous roles. Jimmy even showed a clip from one of Clint's classic Western scenes. The crowd cheered again. But then Jimmy leaned forward. "You know, Clint, people see you as this tough guy, the cowboy, the cop, the man who never backs down. But I'm curious, was there ever a moment in your life where you didn't feel so strong?" The room grew quiet. Clint looked down at his hands for a moment. For the first time that night, his smile faded slightly. "Well," he said slowly, "there was one moment." Jimmy nodded gently. "What happened?" Clint took a deep breath. "Years ago, when my career was really taking off, I was filming almost constantly, traveling everywhere, always working." He paused. "One night I came home late after shooting a film. My house was quiet. My kids were asleep." He looked up toward the audience. "My youngest daughter had left a drawing on the kitchen table." Jimmy asked softly, "A drawing?" Clint nodded. "Yeah, it was a picture of our family. My wife, my kids, and then there was me." Jimmy smiled. "That sounds sweet." Clint shook his head slightly. "I was drawn as a tiny stick figure, standing far away from the rest of them." The audience went completely silent. Clint continued. "And underneath it she wrote, 'Daddy works far away.'" Jimmy swallowed. "That must have hurt." Clint nodded slowly. "That drawing hit me harder than any critic ever could. I realized I had spent so many years trying to build a career that I almost forgot to be present for the people who mattered most." For a moment, Clint's eyes looked watery under the studio lights. "I kept that drawing," he said quietly. "Still have it today." Jimmy leaned back, clearly moved. "You know," he said softly, "a lot of people in this audience probably needed to hear that." Clint smiled again, this time warmer. "Success is great," he said, "but at the end of the day, it's the people waiting for you at home that matter." The audience erupted into applause. Jimmy stood up and shook Clint's hand again. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "Clint Eastwood." The crowd stood for a long-standing ovation, and for a brief moment, the legendary cowboy looked less like a movie icon and more like a man who had learned the most important lesson of all: star.